daddy may just be. Yo, check it out. You're in tune to the dynamic duo, Reese and Ira, on the corner, Real Talk Corner. Real Entertainment Network. Ira and Reese. The talk is still real. We still on the corner. We gonna touch on some topics. SAN, we got topics. Let's have a discussion. The people got questions. The people want answers. Yeah, we got topics. Let's have a discussion. The people got questions. The people want answers. Yeah, it's real talking. It's real talk. It's real talking. It's real talk. It's real talking. Real talk. It's real talking. Real talk. Yeah. Ira and Reese. Dynamic duo. Talk is still real. We still on the corner. Real talk corner. We gonna touch on some topics. It's real talking. It's real talk. It's real talking. It's real talk. It's real talking. Real talk. It's real talking. Real talk. Yeah. Check it out. You're in tune. Well. Reese, you have transformed into someone else.
Me.
Welcome.
Hey, Ira.
Welcome back. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm good. I'm good. Good to be back. It's been a while, a couple months.
Yeah. I had to pull you back in. Because I feel as if I didn't pull you back in, you would have get rusty. And people would have wondered, like, well, where's Siobhan? And
You know, I like being in the comments. I'm a professional spectator. I enjoy being in the comments with everybody else, so I was
oh,
not.
wow. Well, how have you been? How was your weekend? Had a good one?
It was good. It was good. No complaints.
All right. So as everybody start moving in and, sharing this show, we appreciate the shares, the likes, the comments. Tonight we have a guest. We haven't had a guest. Well, actually, we had a guest in a long time, but we hadn't had a political guest in a while. But he's not only a political guest, he's a sportsman too. He deal with a little cricket. Not a little, let me say a lot. You know what I mean? But I think, what fuels most people's thoughts and minds and curiosity would be the politics.
Definitely.
So we're going to have to get into some politics tonight. Of course.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, we have Carlisle E. Powell. And we're gonna bring him on screen, in a while, so that he could, introduce himself to those who may not know him. I think if you don't know him and you're from Nevis, you live under some kind of stone or something. But still, let's bring him on screen right now and let him say goodnight. Oh, wait, hold on, Mr. Powell. Hold on. Your mic didn't toggle over as it should, so we can't hear you. Where is it? Where's the audio? Andy Murphy has finally showed up. I was wondering if he would show up or not.
While you're doing that, let me say good night, everybody in the comments.
Okay, I think I
The
know
usual
why.
crowd is rolling in. Good night, everyone.
What's going on here? Where's the audio mix? Oh, wow. I see the
Tanya,
audio
it's
mixer,
good to
but
see you locked in early, and Gigi. Adele, my cousin Livy, good to see you tonight.
Carl, your mic ain't mute on your side, right?
Because the audio mix playing. Okay, let me see if I could figure it out another way. I'm trying to get this input up, but this input doesn't want to come up. It's wasting my time and our time, and our time is very limited. I don't understand why this, like all the testing and so we did, it decided to shut. No, let's try again. Let's see if that bring you on. That bring you on, Carlisle? No, it didn't bring him on. What? I kid you not. The audio mix doesn't want to come up. Uh, where are you, audio mix? I might have another way to bring him on. Let me see if I could find his call. This is his call. Here, you should be live now. Let's go.
Hi, good evening. How are you
Yeah.
doing?
Murphy decided to show up. Like Murphy just decided to show up and show that he has the law in his hand. We're doing well now. Sorry for the problem, but how are you? Thanks for accepting
I
our invitation, by the way.
I am getting better and better.
All right. So because we lost 6 minutes of our great time, we usually do the introduction and we usually have the guests going a little about themselves. So we're still gonna do that. I guess you're just gonna have to crunch it a little more. Uh, let's start off with your childhood, growing up, school, you know, and then transition into your your different positions over the years and where you're at right now, and then we could go.
We'll do that quickly because I don't
Yeah,
think that people really want to hear about Carlisle.
no,
Probably want to hear other things. I
I
grew
got.
up in Zion Village, right across the Little Gut from the New River Primary School. So that
Hmm.
was my first school. I actually went to school when I was 4 because I saw all the kids going to school and I wanted to go. So I went when I was 4 and they sent me back home for a whole year. So I had to wait until I was 5 to go back to school because I wasn't properly registered.
Hmm.
And so New River Primary School, Gingerland Secondary School, in the first batch of 6 farmers, and then into the world of work. I haven't held a lot of jobs really. I taught for a little bit at Charlestown Secondary School. Then I went to Juicy. I was assistant manager at Juicy for a little while, and then back into teaching at Ivor Walters Primary School. And then I was at the airport for 20 years as the airport manager. Left there when NRP won in 2006. Mr. Joseph Parry invited me to be a member of the cabinet, and so I joined the cabinet. Then had a whole host of different ministries, including communications, works, public utilities, post office, everything, environment, and so on. And then after that, when we lost the government, I was on the opposition benches with Mr. Parry and Mr. Hector for a while. And then in 2017, I left. I've been happily retired and enjoying life.
Okay. You're also the president of the Cricket Association. I'll just put that in there.
Yes,
Yeah,
I was president of cricket for about 10 years back in the 90s.
yeah.
And then I took a break around the time when I think it was when either Alan or Kyron were born.
Hmm.
I was out for a number of years. Managed Nevis teams from senior team down to under 13s, and we had a period there with our under 15 teams when we went for 5 years unbeaten.
Oh,
We put in various captains on the Leeward Islands side, then Javier, Alan, Kyron, those guys. We had good teams coming through. Managed the Leewards team for 4 years, was president of the Leewards board and a director of the West Indies Cricket Board. And then
hmm.
I took a long break from cricket. And I
Okay.
had no intentions of coming back into cricket at all. But
Hmm.
then some parents and some cricketers came and said, listen, we want some help. And so I came back. This is year number 4 that I've been back in Nevis cricket as president. I have a wonderful team. For the first time, we have multiple women in the Nevis Cricket Association elected.
Mm. Mm.
So we have our secretary, Caroline Leibert, is of course female. Vice president is Charlene Martin. We have Jen, who is our treasurer, and then we have Jasmine Charles, who is also a member of the board. So 4 of the 10 functioning members are women, and I hope that when we go back to the polls next month, that we get
Mhm.
more women, because these women have been fantastic for Nevis cricket.
All right. I could think that's right. So I was gonna ask because I thought I heard it someplace that you were a part of the West Indies, like you said, um, cricket board, but you were actually the president.
I was president of Leeward's Cricket Board
Uh-huh.
and a director of the West Indies Cricket Board.
Director.
Yeah,
Okay, there we go.
director,
Okay.
and right up until 2005.
Hmm.
I'm presently vice president of the Leeward's Cricket Board, and
Hmm.
I'm also a member of the West Indies Cricket Board Governance Committee. That is one of the bigger committees on the West Indies Cricket Board.
Okay, so what is your position in the governance committee? What are you able to do in that position?
All, all the major stuff. You have heard about all of those reports we have had recently. All
Hmm.
of those reports would come to the governance committee. We would have discussions on those, and we would look to see how we can implement the recommendations coming from the governance committee. We look at
Hmm.
the board, make sure that there are no conflicts and so on, and we advise the West Indies Cricket Board.
Okay, got you. And
While we're on cricket, I think we should
yeah,
stay here with our questions for a while. Cricket in Nevis, it
yeah.
has there's the conception. I don't know if it's a misconception that cricket has kind of died in Nevis. There's not much activity. As the president of the Nevis Cricket Association, I would think
Mhm.
that responsibility is on your shoulders. What do you have to say about the current state from when you took over the position till now, and where are you planning to take Nevis cricket?
Cricket in Nevis has had some challenges. I'll admit to that openly. When I took over, there were 4 teams. The previous administration had divided into teams that they called franchises, and they were playing among themselves. So the club cricket suffered at that time. What we have done is to go back to clubs, and so that we have 5 Division 1 clubs and 7 Division 2 clubs, which are now functioning and playing cricket. Our next tournament, we have been able to get sponsorship once again. So the Bank of Nevis, for example, they sponsor our 40 over and 35 over competition. National Bank is a part sponsor of our 10-10 competition. And then we have a family which sponsor the 2020 competition. And so we don't have full sponsorship. And your question is justified in that cricket in Nevis really needs a huge injection. A huge injection, not just in terms of capital, but in terms of government support. I've been president of the cricket board in Nevis now for 4 years. This is my 4th year. When I became president, I wrote to the then minister requesting a meeting with him to discuss Nevis cricket. And I went prepared. I went with written communication so that he could see what we wanted. It took a month to get the meeting. We had the meeting, and on reflection, the meeting was an absolute total waste of my time. Not a single request that was on the paper was was granted by the Nevis Island administration. We're talking simple things like covers, an office for the Nevis Cricket Association, equipment, and so on. Matter of fact, a year later, Ricky Skerritt invited me to meet with him as he was paying a courtesy call on the premier. We had that meeting down in St. Kitts at the premier's office. He was then Minister of Tourism. And I showed him the letter which I gave to Eric. And he was surprised. He had never seen it. So it means that I gave it to Eric and Eric left it on his desk because the premier said he had never seen it. if I'm to take his word. And he himself said, listen, some of these are simple things that we can get going. Not one of those things has come to light.
Do you
None.
think do you think that the government's lack of interest has to do with the fact that you are, as an opposition member, are a member, not member, but president of the Cricket Association?
Perhaps, and if it is short-sighted, because I do not represent NRP in politics, in cricket. And the members of the Nevis Cricket Association management team will tell you, we've been together, most of us have been together for the last 4 years. We have never once discussed politics in any of the meetings because I made it clear that we're here about the business of cricket. And cricket in Nevis involve NRP players, players who support CCM, players who don't vote. And so I am not interested in bringing politics into cricket. And the day that that happens, I can take a sabbatical because I really enjoy my free time, you know. So if that is the case, I would be more than a little disappointed. But the reality of the situation is that there is no member of the Nevis Island administration who has shown any commitment to sports in general. As far as they're concerned, it seems to me as if sport for them is interprimary. And even if sports is interprimary has gone no place in the last 35 years since we've been hosting interprimary. We still start at 1 o'clock and finish at 8 and 9 o'clock in the night to run 70 races. We still are dysfunctional and we still are not producing athletes who can move on and go to Carifta having had a good base in interprimary. And this year, for example, I made it my business to encourage the, the Ministry of Sport to send some officials to look at a meet in Orlando. That's an AAU meet, very high quality, 3,800 athletes. I saw these people run 54 800-meter races in less than 2 hours. That
That's
would have taken us
amazing.
in interprimary 2 days. So I said, listen, just come and look at the meet, see how we can improve. No interest. I paid my own money and went. And I will probably go again next year because it's such an efficient meet. Plus, I'm supporting my nephew, who is a gold medalist at that meet as well. But sports in Nevis, the government has showed absolutely no interest. As a matter of fact, let me pick up something that I have here from 2013. In 2013, close to an election, the current premier, Mark Brantley, said the ETW Park will now be the official home of cricket in Nevis. As such, your CCM government will invest some 15 million in much needed upgrades to the grounds and the stands and supporting infrastructure to bring the grounds back to international standards. We can't even host a warm-up game in Nevis. Our government believe that to show support for cricket, they must rent a boxing in kits and spend $100,000 for CPL. When if they give the Cricket Association $100,000, we'd buy some good covers to make sure that you can cover the pitches when we're getting ready for matches, and we can start making improvements to the grounds.
I
Grove
think part
Park,
that,
which is the
sorry, go
E.T.
ahead.
Willett Park, is antiquated. I am embarrassed when people come to Nevis and ask to see our first-class venue. We do not have a first-class venue for a ground that hosted first-class cricket in 1980. It is an embarrassment, but the government don't care about these things.
I think part of it that they're missing as well is that they're showing interest in the CPL. And the thing is, what I've been hearing a lot of people say in the past few years is that they have the interest in the CPL is decreasing because we don't have local players on the SKN Patriots. And it's difficult to come up with local players when you don't have the facilities that they could use to practice to develop the skill. And then, like you mentioned, we don't have the clubs because a lot of the players who would come up to that level, they would come through clubs, I'm sure, in the other countries. So if you're going to say that you would want to see local players in the CPL and you're not doing anything to help it, to me, I don't see how they're expecting to make that connection.
You're absolutely right. Listen, let's go back. We had CPL in St. Kitts. The ground in Nevis, our best ground in Nevis, is worse than the old grounds in St. Kitts, is worse than Canary. So all the matches that were played in St. Kitts, we couldn't host one in Nevis. St. Kitts had the under 19 competition, under 19 World Cup. Nevis could not even host a practice game. St. Kitts had the women's senior competition, 50 overs and 20 overs. Nevis could not even host a practice match. And the government in Nevis is sitting down as if, so what? How are we going to produce players for the West Indies team? It takes about 10 years to produce a test player. About 10 years. And we have people in Nevis with the practical experience. I have two sons who played cricket. Both of them played for Leeward's under 15, under 19, Nevis team. One of them played for the West Indies team. I believe I had a hand in helping them to get where they got in cricket. So I believe I know about this cricket business. But the government in Nevis is refusing to engage the Cricket Association, refusing to put any money into sport in Nevis. The biggest investment at the E.T. Willett Park for the year was when the government sent some people down there to cut down some mahogany trees.
uh, thank you. I did think that was odd that they would spend money on that and not on the actual development of the field. But we don't want to spend too much time on cricket. Ira, do you have any more questions? Cricket related?
No, no, I'm not. I'm trying to keep my mic muted for a little bit until my toddler could like quiet down. The only thing I wanted to bring up was uh what impacts he hopes to make in his position on the West Indies cricket board for Nevis cricket, as well as I guess what impacts have he made over the years being a part of the Leeward Islands and the West Indies cricket board.
Well, I'm not directly on the West Indies Cricket Board. I'm on the governance committee, so I'm not a director of the board.
Thanks
But
for the correction.
in the past, what have we done, Ira? I was a part of the West Indies Cricket Board when we were getting ready to host the World Cup in 2007. So I was a part of the discussions when St. Kitts was hoping to be an international venue to host the World Cup. And I believe that I had a thing or two to do with supporting the St. Kitts bid and speaking to the other directors and ensuring that St. Kitts became a host for the World Cup in 2007 and that St. Kitts remain a host at international level. I wish that I were in a position to do that for Nevis. But in Nevis, listen, Nevis had the opportunity to upgrade the E.T. Willett Park when St. Kitts became an international venue in 2007. But the CCM administration, they spawned the chance. They were not interested until they found out that the money was free money. And it was then too late. You have to have the desire to help and to make improvements. I mean, we have ladies playing cricket in Nevis now. We play at Brownhill. We play at, there are no change rooms. The only facility in Nevis that has change rooms is the E.T. Willett Park, and they're outdated. But we have to schedule matches around the country. So imagine you have Sinkit's team female playing against a Nevis team female, as has happened, and the women have to change in the toilets in 2023.
Nice.
And that's not a pretty visual at all. Sorry to hear that. Siobhan, I'm gonna let you carry on because
That's fine. One more question that's cricket related. You mentioned that we're not getting as much support from the government side. How is it receiving sponsorships from the private sector? Do you find it difficult to have some of the big name corporations sponsor cricket events?
It is because a number of them look at what the government is doing and they seem to be taking a lead from the government so they don't come straight up to the bat.
Mhm.
We have direct interventions. we wrote directly to the Bank of Nevis, for example, and the general manager, Mr. Everett Martin, was kind enough to entertain us along with his then marketing manager, Mr. Fionn Jones. We had a solid presentation, both written and then in our meeting. And I don't do these things alone. I like to carry people with me. So at that meeting, we had myself and another gentleman and two ladies. Four of us went to the meeting. I believe in equal opportunity. And so we went and we made a presentation. We had already forwarded by email our presentation. We went and we made a presentation. We got about 90% of the figure that we asked for. So we were able with that money to go back then and to make sure that first, the day that we had the finals, that the teams were paid their prize money. We don't mess around with that. So the teams were paid all of their prize money, and we were able to fund other things. The Cricket Umpires Association has been working really well with us. And so most of them do not ask for remuneration. And members of management do a lot of umpiring ourselves. We get our pitches done for us because one of the members of management is also a curator. So he does this Brownhill team. They provide the pitch at Brownhill. And so we don't have to spend that kind of money. But trust me, we are still short by sponsorship by at least $100,000 a year if we are to get where we want to get with our under 13 teams, or under 15 teams, under 17, under 19, and then still the senior tournaments. Leeward Islands tournament this year, for example, cost us, and we were playing at home. So you see, it's not a cheap game.
Well,
How much
if
it
you're
costs?
watching and you have a couple $100,000 sitting down, you can sponsor the Nevis Cricket Association. It would be great to get the youth back involved in cricket. Nevis
No,
used to be very well known for cricket, so it would be nice to get us back on the map.
I
What
missed
were
how
you
much
saying?
it costs. I missed how much it costs. He was chipping out.
Our share, as we were told by the Leeward Islands Cricket Board, was $16,000. We ended up spending about $21,000 in the Leeward Islands male tournament this year. So well over 50,000.
I wish we could go into the breakdown of cost and stuff, but in the interest of time, we just have to move on to other
Move on.
topics. Yeah.
I think what most people are here to hear is they want to hear you talk in your capacity of as chairman of the Nevis Reformation Party. So earlier this year you were elected. Were you uncontested for that position?
No,
Well,
Dwight Cozy actually contested the position.
let's get into his role as a minister in government first, as that came before the chairman of minister. Because that's going to segue into a lot of what's going on today. He had his shot at Geothermal. He was a part of that project, if I'm not mistaken. He was the airport manager as well. So the state of the airport and how, I guess he said, for 20 years, in the 20 years, what did you accomplish? Was there any barriers that you faced while you were there? There's just those type of topics. The water supply. Maybe the present government might say you didn't do enough back then, to set them up for today. So we have to talk about the water situation as well. So let's start with the first one, which is
Let's start with the airport first.
the airport. Yeah.
I was a teacher and enjoying life as a teacher. When I was told by the late Ivor Stevens, he called me to his office one day, and I suggested to him that lunchtime might be better for me to come to his office because I was not in the Ministry of Communications and Works, and I was with Education and reported to Ivor Walters. So at lunchtime, I could come to see you. I walked into his office and he said to me, "You are going to be the airport manager." And I said, "Mr. Stevens, I don't know too much about airports. I go to the airport when I'm taking a flight or meeting somebody. He said, "You're going to be the airport manager." And I said, "Okay. If you say it will happen, I will wait for you." That was probably October 1985. And then by December 85, I was on a plane heading to Barbados to do the first course related to the airport. Would you believe it? My first course was in building cleaning. Said if you're going to be the airport manager, you have to know when it's clean and when it's not clean, what to look for. And so that is where I started in 85. I did not actually leave for the airport until October of 1986, correction, October 1986. The funny thing is that when I became the airport manager, my office was in Charlestown. So I went to the airport, but to do administrative work, I had to come back to Charlestown because you just had the one little building over there. So what did I achieve at the airport? When I went to the airport, our fire hall was under a cherry tree outside the customs. When I left the airport, we had equipment, $1 million fire truck we had just recently purchased. We had tractor, rescue boat. We had a fire hall. We had a brand new terminal building, which I was a part of. We had extended the runway from 2,000 feet to 4,000 feet. So all of those things, you must find the DNA of Carlisle Powell in all of those. When I went to the airport in 86, our flights were controlled from Golden Rock in St. Kitts. When I left the airport in 2006, we had an air traffic control tower and we controlled our own little space. So if you hear anybody say that, listen, Carlisle didn't do much at the airport, just tell them that if you see something at the airport, more than likely, it has the DNA of Carlisle Powell written all over it. So I don't worry about people who say those foolishness.
I have two questions. Are you indeed the longest serving airport manager for Nevis? Because 20 years seems like a long time.
Yes, easily. Because after me, Brian had left. Brian was my deputy, Stephen Hanley, and then Darren Sutton. And they're not approaching 20 years. It was a long time.
Okay. My other question is, so were you a part of the team that surprised the former premier with the name change of the airport? Were you one of them who made that decision?
The former premier, Van Sambury, my cousin of late and blessed memory, was a scamp and a vagabond and a liar. Because Vance Amry knew that the airport was going to be named after him. Carlisle Powell did not know. Nobody invited me to the opening ceremony for the terminal building. They didn't invite any of us at the airport. But I came home, I put on my best suit, and I went back to the opening ceremony. And when I was sitting there waiting for the ceremony to start, I got a call from Mr. Carey. Mr. Carey, who is now in charge of customs in Nevis. I'm sure that he would remember. He called me. He was working customs that day, and he said, "Powell, can you come here, please?" And when I went, he said, "Powell, they're changing the name of the airport today." And I said, "Carey, don't tell me any foolishness. That would take," and I gave him how much time it would take, because you would have to send out what we call a NOTAM, notice to airmen. You don't just call an airport today, Newcastle Airport, and then tomorrow you call it Van Sambury Airport. You have to serve notice. And Carey said to me, "Powell, stop playing with me." And he pulled out a pen and he showed me the pen. It was a blue pen. And when he gave me the pen and I read it, it said Vance W. Amry International Airport. That is how I found out that the name of the airport was going to be changed. But to answer your question directly, when I became a member of cabinet, I learned that one of the best ways to get the history of what happened in cabinet was to read the cabinet minutes. And so I used to go to cabinet early. If it was set for 10, I would go for 9:15, and I would get the cabinet secretary to give me the old minutes and I would read them. And lo and behold, I came across some cabinet minutes. And that cabinet that day dealt with and approved the change of the name of the airport from Newcastle Airport to Vance W. International Airport. To my surprise, Vance Amry was the chairman of the cabinet that approved the change of name. And I watched my good cousin Vance Amry sit down and cry, water out of his eyes, and then stand up and say, Malcolm Gishard said we surprise him. And people say, oh, they surprise him. Malcolm was a crook too, he knew. And Vance Amry got up and cried and said, Lord, I don't know what I did to deserve this. The fellow surprised me. Vance was a liar. He was the chairman of the cabinet that approved the name change. He put the crown on his own head. So I was surprised. Vance said he was surprised. I don't doubt him. He lied enough to say anything.
I just figured that as the airport manager at the time, that would have been your decision, and I thought it would have been good of you to do that for your late.
For my cousin?
Yes. As we are on the airport, there's much that has happened over.
I remember being in Antigua, and I was highly teased about the airport being named after the sitting premier. Yeah, they had compared him to like Saddam Hussein and that kind of stuff by Antigua and Bartender. And I was like, wow, this is how we're viewed regionally. I don't know what they're saying globally, but internationally, but regionally. That was during the LIDC days, right? In Antigua. Just reach, gone by the bar to get a giant malt. Okay. And then and that was it. That was the talk of the town. You know, that was the talk of the town. How we got a premier name an airport after and stuff. So yeah, it wasn't a good look.
Well, from then until now, I think Nevis has seen some activity at the airport. At one point in time, we had many flights coming from the likes of Puerto Rico, St. Martin, Virgin Islands. I'm not sure what the activity is like over there now, but what is your view of the state of the airport in Nevis?
Airport is seeing its worst days. I don't know. And I was there for 20 years. We had a lot of small flights when I arrived. But then we got that augmented with American Eagle, who sometimes were coming in twice a day. And with Leat, of course, coming in with the Dash 8 and so on. But the airport has seen his best days. I flew out of the airport a week ago. The surface needs urgent help, especially on the parking apron. The airport has been neglected for too long. We were told by the current premier that Joseph Farry was the cause of the airport losing flights and so on because he didn't like Vance. But where we know, we were told that they had gone to 100 seats a day because they had Seaborn and Seaborn were coming in. But in order for Seaborn to take off safely, they had to have bags of sand on the plane to get some weight. I mean, where are we? And then the premier is playing footsie with this airport deal that he has. I mean, paragraph 37 in the budget. He said, we are therefore negotiating a partnership with a private entity for the further development of the Vance Amry International Airport. This joint venture will involve the extension of the airport runway by approximately 1,500 feet to accommodate some private jets as well as regional jets used by American Airlines and so on. And so I will pause there to ask the question. If you increase the runway length by 1,500 feet, which direction? If you towards Orly, Hurricane Hill is an obstruction which is right in the way. As a matter of fact, a lot of people don't know, but we have a displaced threshold on the western end of the airport that is towards Orly, where you can't land on that first 400 feet because there's a displacement, and that is solely due to the obstruction, which is Hurricane Hill, which is directly in the way. So if you're going to extend by 1,500 feet going towards Orly Beach, then you must take down Hurricane Hill. If you're going to extend by 1,500 feet going towards the east, which is towards Newcastle, you have a problem. Nisbet's plantation is directly in the path. So if you extend towards the east, you're going to lose Nisbet's plantation. There's no question about that, because 1,500 feet will put you close to the gut, which goes down by Nisbet's. So you're going to be flying straight overhead at low altitude. Nobody has told us yet how the 1,500 feet will be distributed. Remember, if you go towards the west, you have Hurricane Hill in the way, and we already have a displacement, so you can't use the first 400 feet for landing. You want all of your landing length. What's the point in coming in half full because of an obstruction? What's the point of extending towards Nisbet's if you're going to lose Nisbet's? And more than that, what is the point of borrowing 20-something million US dollars to extend the runway when you are extending it without being able to use all of what you're extending it by? And then that deal, the Premier says there is no deal. But I have no doubt that there is a deal, because when I look at some of the news that came out, and let me pull up the story here on my phone so that I can make sure thoroughly, and that has to do with the Drahi guys. Let me get that story for you. And they're saying in this story, it's a long story, not broken by the Premier because he's still playing hide and seek. And this is a story from since October of 2022. Talks all about Drahi. Says he invested $30 million in a villa down at Four Seasons. All praises to him. But they now say that Mr. Drahi, who among the aircraft that he used are a Falcon 7X and a Global 7500, all of those need in excess of 4,000 feet. One of them need 5,800 feet, and the other one need 5,505 feet. And so as a result of that, Mr. Drahi, who has found peace and solace in Nevis, they say last May, Blue Airport Limited signed an agreement with the Nevis Island Administration to extend the runway by about 1,500 feet. They will also improve the refueling and so on. No, I'm not worried about how much money Mr. Drahi will finance. They say it might be up to a maximum of $23.2 million. But hear this, the revenue of the airport will be split 70-30 between Drahi and the NIA, with Drahi getting the 70%. On the other hand, all costs, for example, salaries of airport employees, runway maintenance, cost of utilities, etc., will be covered exclusively by the NIA. So Drahi getting 70% of the money.
Oh.
And the NIA must use its 30% to cover all employee costs, all maintenance on the runway. And Drahi is still getting 2% interest on the money that he loans. He's making out like a bandit. Once the repayment is made, the revenues will be shared 70-30 between Drahi and the NIA for 7 years. I want people to understand what I just said. When Nevis finishes paying back Drahi the 23 million US dollars, done, let us say we finish in 2035, all the money is paid back. For the next 7 years, even though he has been paid and he got 2% interest on his money, for the next 7 years, we still split the cost 70-30. Drahi still gets 70% of the revenues. So he got back his money. He got 2% interest, and he still gets 70% for the next 7 years. and the premier says there is no deal, but this story tells me that there is a deal. I'm waiting to see if that those are in truth and in fact what the end results will be, because that is madness. I could put a drunken man to negotiate a better deal than that.
Well, I know the premier, when he addressed the issue, he stated that there was no deal and that when um, anything comes to fruition, that he would be transparent and he would bring the information to the public. It's been almost a year since the story has broken, and we have yet to hear anything further on the deal regarding the airport. If there is a deal, he says there's not necessarily one, but we have yet to hear any details on what is being negotiated. It seems as if the plan is to sign the deal and then come and have public discourse and get feedback, which at that point I think it would be too late, because I don't think any Navision would agree to some of the terms that we've heard are part of the contract.
You want me to give you a reminder? Remember that there was a deal with a company that involved John L. Powell.
Yes,
You remember they signed an agreement. Alexis Jeffers was the man at that time who signed the agreement on behalf of the NIA. You remember that they said to us that they would come back and advise us further. They never
yes,
came back. The
never.
premier very quietly said, listen, they have 6 months to raise the money. If they can't raise the money, then we can renegotiate, we can the offer, whatever. But the troubling part of that deal was that the premier and Vance Amri were part of the federal cabinet. They were down there when Sinkits said to John L. Powell and his group, sorry, this don't make any sense, because they wanted RLB as well. They came to Nevis, and two people who rejected the deal in Nevis said, John L., come boy, we love you. We're going to sign with you. And signed with him, not a thing happened. Nothing, nor did Nevis people hear the details of what they had signed then. Am I holding my breath to see what they will sign now? No. But I would be happy to advise them.
They would not ask for your advice. I think we could be certain of that. The sad situation, though, is that outside of this partnership, I really don't see where else the funding would come from for any development to happen at the airport, and we really do need it. Otherwise, it's just a sitting waste of investment, basically.
He's a white elephant.
I
Depending.
already have questions.
I mean, I thought that was the responsibility of Alexis Jeffers still to this day. I thought that was his new post. So uh, he hasn't come forward and said anything. CCM was elected back when
In
when
December.
did December? He hasn't brought anything forward during the premier's monthly press conference. He hasn't given any report of what Alexis Jeffers has been doing in this position over the past few months. This is like taxpayers' money, so where's the accountability if we're looking at an airport where we're expecting some sort of investment? What is he doing? Nothing. You have no word of that,
Word,
Mr. Powell?
the word on the ground is that they're trying to purchase lands around the airport, and that's it.
Okay. And is it also an option for them to take the airport? I know there is the blockage coming from Hurricane Hill, but if you extend the airport just a little in that direction and then some in the other direction, making up the 1,500 feet, are they able to do something like that in order to extend the airport coming in from the other direction without hampering Nisbet?
Ira, we're going, occasionally we land from the east, depending on the wind direction. So occasionally we land from Nisbets. But let me take you way back to the 80s. When I went to the airport, there was a study which had been commissioned on the removal of Hurricane Hill. Nobody pursued that option. At that time, we didn't have the villas on the side of Hurricane Hill, Hurricane Cove. That might have been a viable option. Purchase it from the owners, have it flattened, use the fill to go into the sea, whatever. That wasn't done. When we started the airport extension, There were 4 options. Hurricane Hill going that direction was one. The other direction, going to the other direction was a second option. Changing the angle of approach was also another option. So that you would have approached more away from Hurricane Hill, coming over more like Timothy Hill, and the airport would have angled into the sea as Tortola did. But it meant that you would have been angling inland as well. So, houses like in Queely, for example, those would have gone a long time ago because you would have been angling coming in that way. We chose this particular option that we chose, in that I think we went 500 feet towards the west, and then we put the rest up towards the east. I don't know if these guys have done studies and are looking at other viable options to use. Because, listen, you spend $28 million US, let's say 60 million. You're not moving that airport again in a hurry. You're not going to spend 60 million and 2 years down the road, you say, listen, let's pick up and let's find another spot to put the airport. So you have to get it right this time. And we just spent, 15 million in 2001 on the terminal. So you're not going to now spend 60 million additional on the runway and then 5 years' time say, let's move. So they have to get it right. But who are they talking to? Who are the experts they're talking to? Not too sure. They have not asked me anything.
Okay. Or maybe they don't view as an expert. I don't know. Maybe that's the case.
That's true too.
Yeah,
That's true too.
They don't view as an expert. All right. So then we could move on from the airport conversation, and then
I want to go to
move.
geothermal, Ira,
Yeah, let's go.
quickly because time
Yeah.
is running out. You
Oh,
can't
yeah,
look up
hour.
geothermal and Nevis and Nazi Carlisle Powell. Every time I try to look up anything on geothermal, somehow there's a picture of Mr. Powell that shows up. I remember hearing about geothermal first back when I was in high school, and it was the NRP who started, I think, the conversation about bringing geothermal energy to Nevis. Um, you guys had um, a term in government, and it wasn't brought to fruition. I feel as if it has now become a word that we hear during the election campaign,
Elections.
and then we don't hear about it again. Um, you've you were heavily a part of it back when NRP was in government. What do you think is the reason why we have not brought geothermal to Nevis? Do you think it's really something that Nevis can expect to happen? Do you think it's something that would really be viable? And with the state of it being what it is now, do you think that it's something that we could look forward to in the near future?
Let me say, first of all, that I absolutely support any advancements towards geothermal realization in Nevis. It is something which is practical. It is something which is doable. It is something which is needed. But let's start with the budget. Let's start with the last budget, which was read by Mark Brantley, the 2023 budget, Monday, the 20th of February, 2023. If you have a copy, go to paragraph 78, and you will see how serious the CCM administration is with respect to geothermal. 7 lines, 6.5 actually. And the essence of what they said is that this has been confirmed. They say we have the best resource, among the best resources in the world. This has been confirmed as a result of studies and wells which were drilled in 2008 by NRP, N1, N2, N3, along with N4 that was drilled in 2018. Let me tell you a secret about N4. N4 is the well that when CCM had a town hall meeting, Nevlec, when somebody questioned the N4, that the CEO of Nevlec said that that well was not properly drilled, it will have to be abandoned. After the government had spent $7 million, he said that they have to abandon the well, pour concrete down it, and so on. This government is just hopeless, clueless, incompetent when it comes to geothermal. We have already spent in Nevis double digits in terms of millions on geothermal. And the company that has made out best is the legal firm, which is representing the various people who come into Nevis. And let me tell you, this is not for lack of being on the job for a long time. Let me show you this. This is the Geothermal Resources Developmental Bill. And you see this? When I came into office in 2006, I found a copy of this, which was redacted. So I had to go to Mark Brantley and ask him, please give me a proper copy, because the copy that I asked you to provide has been redacted. There are some areas which maybe he highlighted, which were blacked out, and I got a better copy. Why do I show this? The draft date on this is October 12, 2004. You know who are the persons who were on this? And this was done by the OAS. They did a study of geothermal in all of the OECS islands. You know who is the last name on this as having been a part of the group to do the study? Mark A.G. Brantley, right down at the bottom. And this study came out in 2004.
Hold
So
it a little
he
closer.
has been, look right at the bottom. See the name right at the bottom?
Yeah, wait.
Mark A.G. Brantley?
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
2004. So he has been involved in geothermal in the OECS and in Nevis for 19 years. And he is as hopeless and as clueless as somebody who has never been involved. How is he interested in geothermal when they spent $13 million to buy a brand new generator? They said they are close, they were ready to drill. They're ready to drill. They said they already know what kind of engine they're going to put in the plant. Just before the 2017 election, they spent $5 million. They brought a drill rig from Middle America, came to Nevis. He put on his hard hat, he took a scissors, went up there to cut some ribbons, and told the people, we're ready, geothermal is ready. And as soon as they won the election, the drill rig packed up and quietly left Nevis. And every now and again, they come back. Listen, I had negotiations with the Caribbean Development Bank on geothermal. They wanted to sell us 2 engines, and we told them, listen, keep your engines. We're not interested in that. We're going full speed with geothermal. We're going to work the engines that we have and manage them effectively so that we don't have power outages. But Mark Brantley, they said they're doing geothermal full speed. We're almost there, and they bought 2 new engines, not one, 2 new engines. Geothermal under CCM is dead. It is going no place in a hurry.
I listened to some of the town hall discussions that they had. I think it was either October or November last year. They had a series of town hall discussions, some with just the general public and some residents who were to be around the Hamilton location. I had some questions coming out, and maybe you could answer me. I think initially there were 2 general areas that were being explored for geothermal energy. It was Hamilton, and then there was an area over in Spring Hill.
Spring Hill.
Why?
Yeah.
Forget Jessup.
Why Jessups? Okay. I think the 2 that they said were more viable were the one in Spring Hill and the one in Hamilton. Why do you think they would choose the Hamilton location, with that being a more populous area of Nevis?
The resources were closer to the surface so that you didn't have to do very deep drilling. And in terms of connections, the power plant is pretty close to that. And so that would have been cheap to harness. And so that option was a good option. The Springfield option was also a good option. And you also have to look at the flow tests that were done. Because you don't just drill and say, yes, we have it. You have to have what they call a flow test. You have to let the well run for a number of days. I think generally is at minimum 72 hours. Sometimes it's a lot longer. And then you continue to do your testing to make sure that the temperatures remain constant. You don't want to know that you're doing 1,000 degrees, for example, and then in a couple of days' time, you are down to 400 degrees, which means that you're diminishing. You need to have the power to continue to run the engines at a particular rate. Now, the other thing that you have to bear in mind, you remember that the Premier said you need water for geothermal because you're re-injecting.
Yeah.
But we have not been drilling any wells in Nevis, so we go find water if you don't drill wells.
Yeah.
That
They
was
think we're gonna
actually
get a
my
river all of
second
a sudden.
question.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was that was my second question, because when in the town hall meetings, when they went into because from if what they said in the town hall meetings would have happened, the drilling and everything would have started in June. And they mentioned that in preparation for the drilling, they would have had to, one, cut a road in Hamilton that leads to the site to allow the trucks and everything to carry the material back and forth. And then they also mentioned that a well would have been needed because the water that's needed for geothermal would tap heavily into the regular water supply. I haven't heard of any drills being dug. I don't know how long it would take. You would know more than I. How long it would take to actually drill a well that would be dedicated to geothermal production. Can you give us an idea of what that timeline would look like so Nevis people could know that until they see this well that should be dug to provide resources for geothermal drilling, until that is complete, we really will not be um, digging anytime soon?
In 19 years, the Premier has not learned a thing about geothermal, so you don't have to worry about him and what he says. We were at the stage where we had finished the exploratory wells, and we had done at Spring Hill, at
Yeah.
Jessops, and at Hamilton. What was needed at this stage was for them to do some production wells so that you can now test those. That was not done. How do you know? Listen, the exploratory wells will tell you, you reach down, you get a certain temperature, and they will tell you, listen, we have the temperature and so on. But that is what is that? That is might be a 4-inch bore. For the production wells now, you might be looking at a 12-inch bore. When you have, listen, just imagine a water pipe, and you have a 4-inch pipe, or in our case, we normally deal with half-inch and 3/4-inch pipe. You have that, you turn on the water full, and that water is rushing through. But that is not what you want now. You have a 12-inch pipe and you want to make sure that the flow is constant coming through the 12-inch pipe. These people have not had one production hole drilled. In all the money that we have spent, that has not happened. So until you hear them say, we have done a production well and we have done an injection hole so that you can put water back into that hole using whatever means you have now. I'm not telling them, listen, go and find water just for geothermal, because the water that we are drilling for is potable water. We are drilling for water to supply our domestic needs. For geothermal and the re-injection, you don't care if the water is potable. You just want water. You don't even have to treat the water. You just have to find water to inject. You know, so
It could be
once
a
the
catch
scientists tell you, exactly. Listen, these guys don't have a clue what they're doing. They're talking to the uninformed, and so they sound bright. But once you start talking to people who know what they're talking about, you know they're talking rubbish.
So basically, you don't think that's something that we will see happening in this term?
No,
We have the funds. We have the funds that have been made available by the CDB. So really and truly, I don't think there's much of an excuse. Do you think the involvement of the Prime Minister in St. Kitts would make a difference in how quickly we advance beyond today?
none whatsoever. You have to look behind what is happening. Listen, in the 7 years we were in office, I met with CDB at their headquarters in Bridgetown in Barbados. I met with CDB at our offices here in Nevis. I met with CDB officials at various conferences around the world. I kind of get a sense as to how these guys operate. Something must be wrong where the premier keeps coming to tell you, listen, these are the goalposts that we had. We were supposed to go out to tender, and then after tendering, we were supposed to shortlist. You notice that the goalposts keep changing? The goalpost keeps moving, and the premier is afraid to come to the people of Nevis to say, well, these are the facts. Every time he come back, listen, this happened, and so we had to do this. This happened. The goalpost keeps moving. I don't believe that the CDB trusts these guys. They're not going to give them a cent to spend. The CDB will spend all the money themselves. Because we have had, by the Premier's own admission, nearly $10 million spent in Nevis and Geothermal. And not a thing has happened apart from the clearing of land up there at Hamilton. Nothing. And I drive up there every now and again, just to check to see if the chain is still across the road.
The last time I checked, there was nothing there. And the last time I checked with people from up there, they said there was nothing there. But I'm interested to know what prevented NRP from getting the production wells drilled.
Listen, the company that we were involved with, Kerry McDonald and his group of people, were at the point where they were now looking for funding to finish the project. It is clear, don't anybody fool you, it is clear that there are members who are close to the CCM and who were in the CCM, wrote to the Export Exim Bank up there in the US and gave them all kind of stories to slow down the geothermal progress. They felt that if geothermal was achieved under NRP, there would be problems with them getting elected again, getting NRP out of office. They cared nothing about Nevis. It was about CCM getting into office. They don't care if it shut down Nevis totally. Listen to me. We were so serious about geothermal. You know a young lady named Anelda Date, an engineer who used to work with Nevlec? We sent her all the way to Iceland to the geothermal university that they had down there. I felt like she was so good that she came back and she was teaching a geothermal course in Costa Rica, some one of those countries down there. And a fellow named Jonathan Kelly. Jonathan Kelly used to work with Nevlec as well. Jonathan Kelly, we sent him out for training in geothermal. Ask the CCM, since they are so serious, how many people they have trained to deliver geothermal. How many people they have trained to work in the field of geothermal. We had already started to pick out people. You're going to this. They're talking the talk about geothermal, but they have not trained a single person in geothermal. So you work out the maths and tell me if they're serious.
Okay, so
Anelda has left Nevlec. Jonathan has left Nevlec.
I know date. But you have proof of like the letters being wrote to the banks at the time. Any proof?
I don't. If you want a hard copy, I don't have a hard copy.
Okay.
But I can tell you that I received calls from people who asked me about information which they said they had been provided to them.
Okay. All right.
Are you want to segue to water? Because geothermal and water, they kind of, they're very close.
No. Definitely water. Let's get into the water situation. So I think I could recall when my brother was building his house. I can't remember the year in exact, right? His brother-in-law, Kimo, he used to work for the water department. Intelligent guy. He stood there and he looked at me and he said, Ira, I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to tell you this. He can see in the next couple of years, Nevis is going to be in a major problem with water. I'm going to fast forward to the next couple of years. NRP had one, and then Nevis lost water. And I can remember the premier being on his show, asking people in New York. That's a classic. That's a classic. I think everybody should remember that. Asking people in New York, I think it was a few days, a week or so after NRP got in power, if they have water, because they don't have any water down here. I think I could fast forward where there was some water issues, and then NRP did some stuff. So I'll let you talk about what did NRP do to combat that water problem. Why are we facing water problem now if NRP put something in place? And let's just take it from there.
When we got into office in 2006, I joined the team a month late. I joined in July. And Mr. Parry said to me, listen, these are your areas of responsibility. And when I heard water, I said, Jesus Christ, I have my hands full. Because when we got into office, Hamilton had not had water for maybe 4 to 6 weeks running in their pipes. And so the first thing that we did was to send up the fire truck to bring some relief to the people. I had a meeting with the people in the water department. George Morris, who is a friend of mine from my area, and George, what are we going to do with respect to water? George said, Powell, we need help. I said, what help we need? He said, boy, the wells are silted over. What that means is that the silt has built up in the wells. So you imagine a little 8-inch hole, and you have silt building up in the wells, and so you have less water to pump in each of those wells. He recommended that we get an ex-driller, Mr. Pinney, who has since passed on. And Pinney came to Nevis, and we cleaned all of the wells in the Padlock area and in the Maddens area. And then we came down to Charlestown up here, Stony Grove, and down by the school. We cleaned, we took those wells out of commission one at a time, cleaned them so that we could start pumping more water from those wells. George Murray said that this is not enough, we need more help, and we found Mr. Brian Kennedy, who had retired and had built a home in Nevis. And I got Mr. Parry and the cabinet to agree that we would hire Mr. Brian Kennedy, who was an experienced water engineer from, I think his island he was from. He had worked in Montserrat, he had worked in Tortola, and the BDD, British Development Division, knew of him, and he was a brilliant water engineer. We hired him, we brought him back, and then we said, listen, we need more water. We got into office in 2006. By 2007, we were drilling wells in Nevis with bead. We contracted bead, brought them into Nevis, and they set about doing their stuff. And we had wells at Maddens, going up by the prison farm. We had a well there at Fottergills. We had a well at Hamilton. Between the wells at Maddens and the one there at Fenton Hill, we were producing about 1 million gallons extra water per day. And so we had hooked those into the systems. And listen, during that period, Nevis had water 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The well at Hamilton, we did not have to use, that was between 300,000 and 400,000 gallons of water per day. But it had a high manganese content. That is, you would normally see that if the water goes up and you see something brown in the water, is normally manifested as something brown. We didn't have to use that, it needed treating. But we had 300,000 gallons of water sitting down. When these guys got into office, listen, you know right now the wells are silted over again. The wells are silted over again, and these guys have drilled no new wells. But in addition to that, I'm told that one of our major wells is down in the well. So what they did was to attach a new pump, didn't retrieve the old pump, and so you can't pump as much water as you would pump if they had retrieved the old pump, so that you have space. They went ahead and they had the treatment done to the well at Hamilton, and so they have brought that online. But if you lose $400,000 gallons worth of production, and you bring on 1,000, you have a deficit of 100,000, and you still have to look and say between 2013 and now, when they have drilled absolutely no new wells, how many new homes have you put on the market?
Within
All of those
outside.
new homes, they don't have cisterns, so all of those need water. You still have the challenge of down there at Indian Castle, where my good friend Banky is. Is government water they're using? I'm not aware that they have any well dedicated to them. All the farmers in Nevis, there is no dedicated supply for farming. You know that when we lost office, we already were advanced in negotiations to put a well down at Indian Castle to supply just the farms. Mark Brantley said that he had committed $10 million for drilling 3 new wells. But that was in 2017. This is 6 years later. They have done no drilling. Next thing I heard, they had sued Bede. They said they paid Bede. They couldn't find Bede. But Bede drilling in Cairn in St. Kitts. But not only that, one of the players in Bede is a fellow named Rollins Isaac. I could go and listen. I could take up my phone and call Isaac. And Isaac, Nevis, Mark Brantley say looking for you. He want you to do some drilling in Nevis. These fellas are in the business of making money. If you tell them, listen, we're going to pay you, you think they're going to say no? We got them to drill for us. When in the first year we were in office, one man in Van Samry, he said he turned on his pipe and he didn't have any water for 15 minutes. So he said, oh, this guy can drop down because I didn't have water for 15 minutes. Where sometimes these days I don't have water here home by me. I have good capacity, I have a big system, and I have a pump. So I have water, but I'm sorry for the people who don't have.
You mentioned that Bede, the situation where he was saying that, they're going to sue Bede because they have paid Bede and Bede is not available. From what I have heard recently, he mentioned that one of the former executive members of Bede would be back in Nevis to do scans again to look for where the water is. Do you have a comment on that?
I saw Dr. Hogue. I know Dr. Steve Hogue very well. I worked with him closely. He's not a driller. He's a scientist who can identify spots and say you should drill in this area and do the analysis and so on. He's not a driller. He's not a drill operator. When you finish with all of that, you need somebody to go and drill the holes to go down to find water. And then you need people to test the water to tell you this is potable water. It meets World Health Standards. We can put it into our reservoirs. These people went about and built a set of reservoirs. This is like somebody saying, hey, listen, I'm going down the road and I'm going to open a bank account. And I'm going to open one in each of the banks. And then you ain't got a copper to put in the bank account. Where are you going to spend if you're not going to money? They built reservoirs all over Nevis, but they don't have any new water.
Ira, you're mute.
Said they don't have any new water, and from what I saw last week, there is no budget for it as well. So
No,
Absolutely $0.
no.
which, it's not a good look at all. How difficult is it for us to find water? When Bede was here, was it difficult for them to source the wells, or was there wells in abundance?
They had a well at Hermitage, which did not yield good results. Listen, you're not going to get 100% good results. So that one at Hermitage did not yield good results. There is a well, when you leave Cotton Ground heading up towards Barnscott, there is a well up there as well, which yielded good results, but here the challenge, the water was really hot. Really, really hot, to the extent that if they had put that in the reservoir, that would have made the water really, really hot. And so they kept off that one. They didn't use it. What was under consideration, though, we had started initial discussions with Cliff Dwellers, Four Seasons, because we were thinking that we would sell them hot water.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to Iceland, and in Iceland, they can sell you the normal temperature water, but they also sell you hot water.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to get water heaters and so on. They could sell you hot water. So we were thinking, Brian Kennedy came up with this idea. Why not let us sell hot water to the hotels and the residents in those areas? So that, and it was something which was doable, but
I'm sure some people would love that now.
Of course.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Very
a
quickly,
good
do
thing.
you think desalination is a solution?
Desalination is indeed a solution, viable, not to me. I tell you something. When we got into office, CCM had already started talking about water. But some of the companies that they had contacted and had bid on water and so on for 1 million gallons a day were desalination companies. One of them, for example, we negotiated with bid, and off the top of my head, we were paying them about, say, $2 million. One of the desalination companies that they were negotiating with was like 8 million. 4 times what we were negotiating with bid and what we signed up for with bid. It is a viable option, but trust me, water, and the premier said water is now at $13 per 1,000 gallons. It is going to go to at least $25 per 1,000 gallons with desalination. It is going to be a significant increase in costs.
Wow. Wow.
Okay,
Wow.
Ira, you have any more topics you want to touch? I want to get into the fun fact.
I just want to ask Carlisle about the horse on the hill, because I never believed that the horse on the hill should be on the hill. And last time I checked, when it was built, he was in charge of physical planning. So what happened with that horse on the hill, Carlisle? If I say the horse on the hill, I know you know which horse I mean when I say the horse on the hill.
You must be talking about that house over in St. Thomas's, way up in the mountain.
Yeah,
Um,
in the mountain, not the hill, the
yeah,
mountain.
it is above the 1,000-foot line.
Yeah.
That house was built and escaped physical planning. The first I heard about it was when very irate Mr. Parry called me to question it, and I had no knowledge about it. But when I met with my people, I found out that yes, that house was built way up the mountainside above the 1,000-foot line, and at that stage the house was more or less completed. In Barbados or Trinidad, they would have sent a bulldozer to take it down.
Yeah.
And I must admit that that was my recommendation. It's above the 1,000-foot line, you broke the law, push it down.
Yeah.
That was in the minority. But it ought not to have been there. We are protected above the 1,000-foot line, and I totally believe in that. Nobody should violate the law and build anything above the 1,000-foot line, because we are protecting the watershed.
Yeah.
People
So
must
what
not
is
come into our country and break the law.
They had no consequence at all?
I think they probably paid a fine.
A small
I think
fine?
they paid a fine. Yeah.
Not a continuous fine for every time
No,
you're
not a
on
continuous.
above it? Oh, okay.
No.
I would have had them pay a continuous fine. I guess you have to go based on the life if it's governed by a law policy. I don't know. But all right. Well, Siobhan, you could take it into what you would love to take it into.
I actually have one question related to this that just came in my mind. I wanted to ask Mr. Powell before we go into that. We talk about the house on the hill. We know about the ocean reef matter that's down on the beach, and then we had the Candy Resort matter. All of those are projects that seem to skirt environmental protection laws. There is a resort. Well, I'm not going to call it a resort. There's a development over, I think, in the Madden's area by Aspara. Well, the premier doesn't know how to say it correctly. I definitely don't know how to say it either. It was brought to us kind of undercover. The premier mentioned that it was a technology park. Many people have said that it looks to be built as a residential property. People are speculating that it is dorms for the nearby Medical University of the Americas. When I heard the Premier say in one of his press conferences that the owners of the development have applied for the technology park to now be used as a residential property, and that his government was thinking about granting them that permission, I was concerned that this would now be the modus operandi for the government to begin projects and state them as being in one category, and then after that has been approved and it is in construction or been been constructed, change the classification of the um, development, and by that we kind of bypass environmental protection laws that may require a specific type of EIA or something to be done. Is that something that the NRP itself is concerned about? Because it seems as though the current government, they don't have much consideration for environmental laws when bringing forward development.
Listen, you forgot a very important one, so I will direct you to Nevis Paradise Limited, the claimant, and the Nevis Island Administration. 2, the Director of Physical Planning, and 3, Paradise Beach Holdings Limited. And this case involves the building of those 5 villas down at the beach at Paradise. It is an interesting case. And in this case, and this is a copy of the judgment which I'm holding here in my hand. The judge at paragraph 55 said, consequently, I conclude that the cabinet approval, because the cabinet approved the building of the villas, even though the setback from the beach in law was not as it should be. The cabinet, they went to cabinet, and as far as they're concerned, they said to hell with the law. We're the cabinet, we're going to give approval. But the judge said, I conclude that the cabinet approval and the planning approval are both unlawful insofar as they purport with the zoning plan contrary to section 14 and section 15 of the zoning law. Then okay, they approved it anyhow. Cabinet approved it. The judge said, no, sorry, you got it wrong. But they didn't care because they allowed those the 5 villas to stay on the beach when they should have been removed. Let me see who was the judge in this case. Professor Dr. Eddie Ventos. He was the judge in this case. Come back to the one that you brought. Are you aware that the one which the premier said that applied, no, they wanted them to be residential and so on? Are you aware that the owner in that case is the same owner as the owner for Candy Resort?
That's what made me even more alarmed, because if he didn't get through with Candy Resort because of the environmental laws, I think it was a case brought by Miss Ann Bass.
Exactly.
It jumped in my mind that maybe this time he decided, okay, I'm not going to say it's a residential development. I'm going to say it's a technology park. That way I could bypass the environmental laws, and then the government is now going to help me change it and get the designation of a residential property after the fact. That was my concern.
Listen, let me answer Adele, because Adele asks why the judge didn't order the villas to be removed. Adele, I told you what the case is already. I want you to go to paragraph 117 of the case, where the judge made the following orders. An order of Centorari, I might get it wrong, is granted to quash the cabinet approval. An order is granted to quash the planning approval. An order is granted mandating the intervening party to demolish all of the development known as the villas for which planning approval was given, and to restore the beach to its natural state before any construction commence within 30 days of today's date. The judge ordered for them to be demolished. That is, I got the case. Now, with respect to the Candy Resort, I expect any and everything to happen with over there at Candy Resort. The premier is not unknown to the gentleman. When Anbas brought this matter against the planning and the development advisory committee and so on, Mark Brantley at various times, he and his wife were involved in the project. Let me read from paragraph 115. And this is a different judge. This is Justice Ramdani. Here, Justice Ramdani, paragraph 115. There is evidence that the unusual happened. The Deputy Premier, Mark Brantley, and his wife began to speak for the developers, who is the same man down there with the Asparas thing, began to speak for the developers who had submitted an application for planning permission. Talks of a sale of the property began. The evidence shows that the applicant expressed her readiness to buy the property and bars. To my mind, this is relevant to the issue of good administration and any prejudice which may have been caused the developer. Here, there is evidence that when a complaint was made to the government about a flawed development, and I insert by Anbas, the official's response, official meaning Mark Brantley's response, was to inform the complainant that the developer will consider selling the property. They were considering selling the property. Mark was representing the government as deputy premier. He was representing the interests of, it got to be his wife, real estate, because he now talking selling the property. This is an interesting judgment by a second judge, Justice Ramdani. It shows that, listen, these fellows don't care about Nevis and brought this case and Mark Brantley's way of solving the matter. You want the property to buy?
Conflict of interest.
Muted.
Okay.
As usual.
Ira, you want to go into the? Let's go into the. I think most people are here for your
Yeah.
position as chairman of the NRP. You would have won that. Ira, I was stuck. Am I good?
You're good. Yeah, you're
Okay.
proper.
You would have won the post this year. Earlier this year at the NRP convention, which I must say I enjoyed watching the convention that you guys had. You've been around the party for a long time. Why did it take so long for Mr. Carlisle Powell to run for chairman of the NRP?
I actually sat in the chair sometime before, not having contested. There was an election, the last election, which was won by Herman Bobby Labor of late and blessed memory. There were persons who encouraged me to run, but I'm a principled man. Bobby had done so much work for the party and had been chairman of the party for such a long time that there was no way that Carlisle Powell was going to contest against Bobby. So what I did when people came to me and suggested that I run, I went to Bobby. I said, listen, Mr. Labor, people are asking me to run. I want you to know that I'm not going to run against you. I would run as deputy, but I will definitely not contest any election against you. And I became deputy to Bobby. Bobby took ill and was away. And so I was chairman of the party acting chairman for a considerable amount of time. And I had no intentions of running for the chairmanship of the party. But sometimes when you sit outside and you look and you say, listen, there are things that could be improved upon and maybe I can help. So I decided, listen, after a couple of persons had called me and encouraged me, listen, I was in politics, away from the executive. I was enjoying life. I like my domino nights. And so, but after a couple of people said, listen, we could use your expertise, I came back and I contested. why did it take so long? Politics is not about position. Politics is about getting things done, not necessarily about positions. And I've never been one for those positions. I served as a minister of government, and I still used to cringe when people say honorable. Honorable what? I'm Carlisle, Powell, a little boy from Zion. So I don't have to be in a position so that people could say, look at him. The passport used to be way down in my bag because that didn't mean anything to me. What meant something to me was getting water to the people in Hamilton, building a road down in Cox so that people who used to have to walk through water to go to school can now have a proper road to walk on. Making sure that people had electricity, that they had water, that the post office actually worked. Because people used to tell you in those days that they used to get January, February, and March bills together. And then the utilities tell you they don't send them out at the same time, making sure that the postmen did their work and the postwomen did their work. Those are important things to me. What was important to me then was getting NRP to have a revised constitution. So we spent a lot of time working on the constitution when I was acting chairman, and Bobby, I didn't know at the time, was on his deathbed. That was important to me. What is important to me this time around is modernizing the constitution, making it easier to get things done in the party, and ensuring that we follow rules and regulations within the party. Those are the important things to me. And once I have done my bit, I have no intentions of staying around. I come in, I do my bit, I gone again.
Well, I was going to save this one for later, but I think now is a good time to inject it.
You brought it up.
A certain person said,
Cleon, you mean Cleon.
let me get this straight. The self-appointed political advisors and analysts in St. Kitts and Nevis are one, and I believe one is Mr. Carlisle Powell. One who refuses to put his name on a ballot. All back and no bite. That is true. You've been around the party. You're just not running for chairman of the party. You have not put your name on the ballot. I don't know if you ever intend to. What is your response to that? Are you all back and no bite, Mr. Powell?
Cleon, and who named Cleon?
Nah, I mustn't.
Cleon Stapleton Simmons, former representative for Nevis 5.
Honorable.
I don't recall. I don't recall.
Honorable.
I don't remember who named, so I just delete people out of my memory.
Yeah.
You know, so I just want you to know I just delete people out of my memory. Okay, let's look at this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Name me one. We have been independent for 40 years, which means that we have had a Nevis Island administration for 40 years. All back and no bite. Show me one minister of communications who has done half of the work that Carlisle Powell has done. Just one. All back and no bite. When we got into office, the road from Market Shop to the Anglican Church was a mess. You know what we did? We fixed the whole road. I have a letter on file which I don't have here with me tonight. My cousin Van Samry went to a town hall meeting at the New River Methodist Church one night. And the next day he wrote a letter to Joseph Parry to say, Minister Powell says he's going to straighten out the roads and you should warn him to leave the roads as it is. Remember you used to go around in little corners there by Kit got to go by Helen Brooks? And I decided I come from Zion and there must be some kind of legacy and people could understand that there was a minister named Powell and this is what he did. All back and no bite. You drive on that road that we fixed in 2008. It's still good. Has never been repaired. It's wider. It's straighter. It's more level. That is all back and no bite. I put water in the pipes throughout Nevis, not just in Gingerland, throughout Nevis, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, constantly. We drilled wells which are still providing water for the people of Nevis. So when people hear people say things and they repeat them, all I will say, stop the interview. I feel that you're becoming combative. Are you becoming combative? Stop the interview.
we will proceed. We won't stop the interview. So I think everyone who is watching would know that the NRP had some serious hiccups after I think what was a pretty good election in
Hiccups.
um, December. We didn't walk away with, okay, I can't say we. NRP didn't walk away with the victory
Hmm.
in December, but there were some grounds made, especially in areas like Gingerland where we hadn't seen grounds made before. Um, then we had the situation with Cleo, and I won't delve into that because, quite honestly, I'm over it. Um, I think what that did is it brought to light that there was probably some constitutional changes that needed to be made in the party. How have you guys internally addressed that? We've seen that she has been excommunicated. But how have you addressed that internally to make sure that a situation like this doesn't happen again?
We went to the General Council. Well, first of all, there was a committee that was put in place to look at the Constitution. And it had Dr. Andre Busso, who had worked in 2019, and myself returning to that committee. We had Dr. Kelvin Daly, and we had Stephen Hector. So the four of us worked on the existing Constitution and made significant recommendations. So significant that when we presented to the the executive of the NRP, it took us 2.5 hours to present the changes which were recommended. Some of the changes were immediately accepted and sent forward to the General Council, who accepted them, and then those were agreed on at the convention voted and passed. There are still some outstanding changes which are to be considered. And so the committee, I think our date is sometime this month, where we are going to have to go again to the management in terms of the executive and make the other recommendations. But we have made some subtle little tweaks to the Constitution so that what happened the last time around should not happen again. As a matter of fact, one of those little recommendations that we made is that when you become a nominee for the Nevis Reformation Party, that you sign certain documents which would say that you are supporting XYZ.
Okay.
So it's like, it just shouldn't happen again. We don't, listen, when you contest for the leadership of the party and you win, you win. When you lose, you just have to go and try to contest again sometime in the future. You can't lose and operate as if you won. And that is what some people didn't understand. When you lose, nobody says that you must leave the party. But what we say is that you must follow the leader. You have objections, you raise your objections. I sat in a cabinet with Joseph Parry, who was my leader, who was the premier of the island. And if there was a matter which I didn't feel about, I would, okay, this is my position and this matter. But once the other members of the cabinet decide, hey, listen, this is the path we want to go, Carlisle Powell goes in line. I've already made my position known. The other fellow said, this is where we're going. I fall in line.
You mean like not to bulldoze the horse up on the hill? Cause me not hear. I mean I didn't get to
Exactly.
hear who. I didn't get to hear who objected, but I guess we ain't got the time for that. Yeah, go ahead,
Outside
Siobhan.
outside of internal constitutional changes, I think one of the probably the I don't want to call it a flaw, but uh, let's call it that. A flaw in the national constitution that was brought out was that Mr. Brantley is now able to, I was told me to say the premier. The premier is now able to say that because of the little debacle within the NRP, even though there were two members elected from NRP, he can use the constitution to say that there is no leader of the opposition. How is NRP planning to address that? Because
Sounds
I
like
think it is,
dictatorship to me.
Right, and I think it's not something to be taken lightly that a premier could interpret it how he wants to and withhold that position. And he's not withholding it from the NRP per se, he's holding it from the people of Nevis because it is a critical function to have a leader of the opposition. How is NRP planning on addressing that and bringing a result to the people that would favor them so that the premier can't continue to say, I don't want to appoint a leader because it should be constitutional that we must at all times have a leader of the opposition.
Mark Brantley will be remembered by historians and by people who read this period of our history as a coward, as a very dictatorial person who was very anti-democracy. He's putting it off as hiding behind the Constitution and saying that the Constitution does not allow one person to be leader of the opposition. Mark, if I were on the other show, the topics, I would have called him something else, which is not allowed on this show. But look at it this way. By refusing to appoint a leader of the opposition, does Mark Brantley remember when CCM had one seat and the late Governor General, who was the Attorney General, allowed and supported Mr. Fred Paris to be a nominated member on the other side and for Dia to be a leader of the opposition? Does Mark Brantley remember as well that Lionel Nolan was appointed and sent to sit by Mr. Parry? How does Mark Brantley feel when he goes to sleep at nights, knowing that there is no public accounts committee? And no public accounts committee because there is no leader of the opposition. There is nobody to watch and to look at Mark and say, well, boy, the more money you get is the more money you spend and is the deeper in the hole Nevis goes. There is no public accounts committee in Parliament. The Integrity Commission cannot have full membership for one reason, because there is no leader of the opposition to appoint a member on the Integrity Commission. Does that make him feel proud? Well, he says that he looks up to somebody like Mayor Motley. You know how many seats they have in Barbados? 31. You know who won all 31? Mayor Motley. That is a leader of the opposition in Barbados. You know there are senators appointed in Barbados on the opposition side. And you know why? Mayor Motley said, listen, with all the seats, I would be allowed to appoint all of the members of the judiciary. But that can't be right. That cannot be right because people voted for the opposition. So as a result of that, I want to make sure that there are members sitting on the opposite side to challenge us. In Nevis, the emperor without clothes, the one who can't get nothing done, has decided, I am king, I am God. And so there will be no leader of the opposition. When Mark Brantley is finished with politics, he will be passing people and begging them to tell him hello. And people will pass him as if they don't notice that there goes somebody. His place in history will not be a kind place, because he has caused more division in Nevis and in Nevis politics and amongst the people of Nevis than any other person in politics ever in the history of Nevis. He's in a sorry place, and I'm sorry for him.
My question though, thank you for all of that. What is NRP going to do about it? Is there anything that NRP can do to...
We have written to the ombudsman.
Okay.
Do we expect anything to happen? I expect the ombudsman to do his job and to look out. But there is more. I believe that there is a role for the Governor General in all of this. And I believe that Dame Marcella Liebert, in her own wisdom, should be able to look at this and to say that, listen, this is foolishness that these people are saying, and that they ought to be a leader of the opposition. And as such, I will appoint the leader of the party which had the most votes in the last election on the opposition side, which is NRP. It is as simple as that. I really believe that that can happen. If that can't happen, it means that our constitution ain't worth much at all, at all, at all.
I hope that something does happen regarding this, because, like I said, it's putting the people of Nevis at a detriment. Okay, so the situation happened. We were in limbo for months, for a couple of months, waiting to see what would happen. Some months ago, I think it was after the NRP convention, the candidate for St. George's, Rohan Isles, he declared that he would like to be the caretaker for the St. Thomas's parish. I have two questions. One is just me looking yours. Did he get permission from the NRP to say that at the time?
He didn't need permission from the NRP to say that at the time.
I just wanted
He
to.
was in the capacity as caretaker up in. He was indeed in Gingerland. He was nominated, so he contested the election. The elections were over, and so Rohan had discussions with Gingerland, and he advised them that, hey, listen, I would like the opportunity to contest at home, and there is nothing wrong with that. He made this statement. I rather support this statement. You're going over there, don't go cooping. Let people know that this is your position. And he let
The
people
reason
know that that was his position.
the reason why I asked is because after he made the declaration, it took some time for it to actually happen. We just heard the announcement last week that he um, has been confirmed to be the official caretaker in St. Thomas's. What took you guys so long?
What was the process?
There's a process. And Rohan is going to be on Tell Me on Thursday, himself and party leader Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge. And we will explain the process. That is a question that I will ask the party leader.
Okay.
But we had made certain little changes to the constitution. And as a result of that, those that were accepted, you had to go through the process. And so the process was followed. It took a little longer than some people wanted. Some people wanted it done in a hurry. It seemed as if somebody had told them that there was going to be an election in September of 2023. I was never one of those persons who thought that there was going to be a snap election, because the premier would be too scared to call an election. He lost the seat in the last, he was losing before there was the delay, and whatever happened. So I don't think that he would have taken the chance to go back to the polls. So I wasn't worried about there being a quick election.
You think waiting until there's an election wouldn't be to the detriment of the party?
Yeah, but there is no election. Rohan has been announced as the candidate, as the caretaker in number 5.
Mm-hmm.
He now has to hit the road. I would believe that in the time that he was waiting, that he already started putting plans in place. And so it's a matter of executing now. So Rohan now has to hit the ground, go out and make connection with the people in St. Thomas's, and let those people see him. Let those people understand that he is the NRP candidate. He is the NRP caretaker. I got to be careful. Caretaker.
Mm-hmm.
Candidate is when you come up to elections. So he's the caretaker in that area, and that he has the full support of the machinery of the Nevis Reformation Party. And I keep telling people, listen, the fact that I supported Cleone over there, wait, who name's her again?
Yeah.
The fact that I supported the person over there last election, I supported NRP. That person was the face of the NRP. But this election, I am going to be on the ground in St. Thomas's for Rohan Isles. No question about that. I will be knocking on doors. I will be talking to people. And I will be getting people to understand that he is the NRP person in the area.
Is it because you're worried, or is it because you're excited? I want to know. Is it because you're worried, or is it because you're excited?
No, listen, I don't get worried about politics, and I don't get worried about people. What Peter Wickham say, people who commit political suicide, I don't worry about them. No,
Well,
I'm with the future.
the NRP trade is still short a caboose. We don't have currently a representative in St. George's. What are your plans for that, and how soon are you guys looking to
Be-
get that position
before
filled?
he answer that
We will
question,
follow the process.
I want